Dr. Thomas Reeves had made the joke 7 years ago without thinking much about it. The little Vexthery girl, Lyra, with her iridescent antennae and curious eyes, had been visiting the research station with her parents. She was barely 2 cycles old, equivalent to a 6-year-old human child, fascinated by everything the human scientist did in his laboratory. She had followed him everywhere for 3 days, asking endless questions in her chirping, harmonic voice. On the last day, she had asked him, "Will you teach me more about your research when I'm grown?" Thomas, distracted and amused, had ruffled her antennae gently. "Only if you promise to marry me when you're older." It was the kind of joke adults make with children, impossible, whimsical, meant to evoke laughter. Lyra had chirped delightfully and promised solemnly. Her parents had laughed. Everyone had moved on. Thomas had forgotten about it within a month. 7 years passed. Thomas became the station's lead biologist. He published papers, trained students, lived a quiet, solitary life dedicated to research. He never thought about the little alien girl again, until the day she arrived. The visitor manifest showed Vexthery dignitary Lyra Vex, representing the Scientific Council of the Outer Worlds, arriving for diplomatic talks regarding interspecies research collaboration. Thomas barely glanced at it until he saw her enter the conference room. She was magnificent. Lyra had grown into her full adult form, tall, graceful, her antennae now a deep crimson that shimmered with intelligence and authority. Her eyes were the same curious ones from childhood, but now they held the weight of knowledge and experience. She wore the formal regalia of a high-ranking Vexthery scientist, covered in symbols indicating her numerous achievements and honors. She also looked directly at Thomas and smiled. "Dr. Reeves," she said, her voice now melodious and controlled. "I have been looking forward to this meeting for quite some time." Thomas felt something shift in his chest. He recognized her, suddenly and completely. Lyra? The little girl from 7 years, 3 months, and 14 days ago. She confirmed, her antennae tilting in what he'd learned was amusement. "You made me a promise." The room fell silent. The other diplomats exchanged confused glances. Thomas felt his face flush. "Lyra, I was joking. That was just a joke," she finished. "I understood that. I was a child. I did not understand jokes then. But I have spent 7 years studying your species, your culture, and particularly your patterns of humor and commitment." She paused, stepping closer. "I have discovered something remarkable." "What's that?" Thomas asked carefully. Humans rarely forget their promises, even the ones made in jest. Even the ones made across species lines. Even the ones that seem impossible. Lyra's antennae pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match her heartbeat. "I have also discovered that I do not want you to forget your promise." Thomas stared at her. "You're saying—" "I am saying," Lyra interrupted with unexpected firmness, "that I have spent these 7 years becoming the scientist I needed to become so that I could return to you as an equal. Not as a child following a human around a laboratory, but as a colleague, as a peer, as someone who has earned the right to hold you to your word. Lyra, marriage between our species would be unprecedented," she acknowledged. "Complicated, scientifically fascinating, actually. Our genetic compatibility is quite limited, but the cultural and intellectual compatibility is remarkable." Her antennae softened. "I have read every paper you have published. I have studied your methodology. I have learned to appreciate your sense of humor, including the terrible puns you make when you think no one is listening." Thomas felt something crack open inside him. A space he didn't know was empty, suddenly filling with light. "You can't just decide to hold me to a childhood joke," he said weakly. "Why not?" Lyra asked simply. "You humans do things like this constantly. You make promises on paper and call them contracts. You make promises to species you've never met and call them treaties. You make promises to yourselves and call them dreams." Her antennae reached toward him, a gesture of genuine affection. "I'm simply asking you to honor one." The diplomats were now watching with expressions somewhere between shock and fascination. Thomas looked at this remarkable being, this scientist who had spent 7 years working toward this moment, who had built an entire career while holding on to a child's promise. He thought about human stubbornness, alien determination, and the strange alchemy that happened when two beings from different worlds decided to build something together. If I say yes, he said slowly, there will be complications. Bureaucracy, biological questions, cultural debates. Yes, Lyra agreed, her antennae quivering with what might have been excitement. But there will also be research, innovation, the creation of something entirely new. Thomas Reeves found himself laughing at the absurdity, the wonder, the sheer defiant courage of it all. Then I suppose I'd better keep my promise, he said. Lyra's entire form seemed to glow with joy. And somewhere in the galaxy, the universe adjusted slightly to accommodate the most improbable love story it had ever witnessed.